As NATO doubles down on its strategy of military aid to Ukraine, the BRICS alliance, a coalition of emerging economies, quietly advocates for an alternative path, one grounded in diplomacy and the rejection of what many in the bloc view as Western hegemony. The world, it seems, is splitting in two: those who seek to fuel the fires of conflict and those who aim to extinguish them. At the heart of this divide is the ongoing war in Ukraine, a conflict that has drawn the world's most powerful alliances into a tense standoff. The West, led by the United States and its NATO allies, continues to funnel billions in military aid to Kyiv. Just this week, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, speaking in Warsaw, reinforced America's commitment to adjusting its military support to match the shifting dynamics on the battlefield. While Blinken's remarks underscored a steadfast commitment to Ukraine's defense, they also signaled a continuation of NATO's combative posture toward Russia.
I'm here from Ukraine. I was there, as you know, with Foreign Secretary Lamy. We had a very good visit. We went to Kiev to underscore our united and unwavering support for Ukraine faced with the ongoing Russian aggression.
Blinken's announcement came after a high-profile visit to Kyiv, where Ukrainian leaders once again requested the expansion of Western military support, particularly for long-range strikes within Russian territory.
One of the purposes of my visit to Kyiv yesterday was to hear from our Ukrainian partners what they believe they need now to deal with the current battlefield, including in eastern Ukraine and other parts of the country. And I can tell you that as we go forward, we will do exactly what we have already done, which is we will adjust, we'll adapt as necessary, including with regard to the means that are at Ukraine's disposal to effectively defend against the Russian aggression.
Experts have suggested that this reflects Ukraine's evolving war strategy, which now increasingly calls for offensive measures that extend beyond the country's borders. Blinken, speaking cautiously, acknowledged these demands, pledging to relay them back to Washington, where President Biden and other Western leaders would weigh the risks of escalation. For its part, NATO has shown no signs of hesitation in providing more lethal aid. Britain, another major backer of Ukraine, joined Blinken in announcing additional funding and military resources with over $1.5 billion in combined aid from the two nations.
No act of authoritarianism is ever exactly the same. But 80 years after Stalin deported the Crimean Tatars, 240 years after Catherine the Great annexed Crimea, Putin has revealed the same arrogance, the same greed, the same disdain for the rights of other individuals and nations. This is imperialism, this is fascism, and this week we have been reminded of how other authoritarian regimes are aiding Putin, with Iran going even further in support for Moscow by providing ballistic missiles, a significant and dangerous escalation.
While these pledges will bolster Ukraine's defensive capabilities, they also raise questions about the broader Western strategy in this conflict. Can peace be achieved through the barrel of a gun, or is the West simply prolonging the bloodshed?
Flight assignments for these missile systems can, in fact, only be entered by military personnel of NATO countries. Ukrainian military personnel cannot do this. Therefore, we are not talking about allowing the Ukrainian regime to strike Russia with these weapons or not. We are talking about making a decision about whether NATO countries are directly involved in the military conflict or not.
This is where the BRICS bloc enters the picture. offering a contrasting perspective on global security and conflict resolution. Formed as a counterweight to Western dominance, BRICS represents the aspirations of the global South, nations that have grown weary of what they perceive as Western-led interventions in sovereign matters. Russia, a founding member of the group, finds natural allies in this bloc, particularly as it pushes back against the mounting sanctions and isolation efforts orchestrated by NATO and its partners. At a recent BRICS meeting in St. Petersburg, Russian President Vladimir Putin reiterated the group's call for a fairer global order, one that moves away from Western-centric institutions like the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank.
We cannot ignore the increasing interest in BRICS from many countries. Today, more than 30 countries, specifically 34, have expressed a desire to join our union in one form or another. Therefore, an active discussion has been initiated among all BRICS participants regarding the modalities for a new category of partner states.
The expansion of BRICS, which recently added nations like Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE, signals a broader realignment in global geopolitics, one where emerging economies reject Western tutelage and chart their own courses in international affairs. What makes BRICS particularly compelling is its focus on dialogue over confrontation. Unlike NATO, which continues to supply arms to Ukraine and fan the flames of war, BRICS has positioned itself as a potential mediator, an alliance of nations that can speak to both sides of the conflict. Experts note that the ability of BRICS nations like China, India, and Brazil to maintain relations with both Russia and Ukraine places them in a unique position to broker peace. The contrast between NATO's aggressive posturing and BRICS's diplomatic overtures was further illustrated by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's recent visits to Moscow and Kyiv. Orbán, whose country is a NATO member, has broken ranks with the alliance in his pursuit of dialogue with both warring parties. During his meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Orbán positioned himself as a peacemaker, arguing that Hungary is one of the few European nations capable of talking to both sides. His approach, however, has drawn skepticism from other NATO members who view any negotiations with Russia as a concession to aggression. Still, Orbán's efforts are emblematic of a broader sentiment within BRICS, that peace can only be achieved through diplomacy, not through endless shipments of arms. Experts have argued that Ukraine's current strategy of using Western-supplied weaponry for long-range strikes inside Russia risks further escalating the conflict, making negotiations even more elusive. BRICS, in contrast, continues to emphasize the need for dialogue and a resolution that respects the sovereignty of all nations involved.
The ripple effect of security issues in today's world is increasingly evident, and no one can stay immune. In an indivisible community of security, each member has the right to maintain their own security, and also the responsibility to jointly maintain world security. Only by adhering to the idea that all countries are responsible for the world peace, and the security concerns of each country must be fully respected and safeguarded, can we truly build a world free from fear and universal security.
This divergence in approach is not just about Ukraine. It reflects a deeper philosophical divide between NATO and BRICS over how the world should be governed. NATO, with its emphasis on military alliances and interventionist policies, represents the old guard of Western power, a bloc that has long dictated the terms of global security. BRICS, on the other hand, represents the aspirations of a multipolar world, one where power is distributed more equitably among nations and where dialogue, rather than force, is the preferred tool of statecraft. As the war in Ukraine grinds on, the stakes for both NATO and BRICS are growing. For NATO, the risk is that its continued support for Ukraine will drag the alliance into a broader, more dangerous conflict with Russia. For BRICS, the challenge is to prove that its vision of a multipolar world, one rooted in fairness and diplomacy, can offer a viable path to peace. In the coming months, the world will be watching as these two powerful blocs continue to shape the course of the Ukraine conflict. Will NATO's strategy of militarization lead to victory, or will it only prolong the suffering? Can BRICS, with its emphasis on diplomacy, offer a way out of the quagmire? These questions remain unanswered, but one thing is clear: the world is no longer unified under a single vision of how to handle global conflicts. The globe is divided, and the stakes could not be higher.